Ethical Perspectives on the News is produced by the Interreligious Council of Lynn County, which is solely responsible for its content. The views and opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of the staff and management of KCRG TV9.
And welcome to Ethical Perspectives on the News. I'm your moderator, Karl Cassell of Perhaps Today Incorporated. We have entered into the age of artificial intelligence, virtual reality, and self-driving vehicles. As the technology continues to evolve, individuals, organizations, cities, and our nation will have to adjust to this new phenomenon. Specifically, the transportation industry is beginning to transform itself in front of our very eyes, and the future of it will likely depend on policymakers, manufacturers, and the public demand for continued evolution of transportation. So joining us this morning to discuss are two resident experts. First, to my left, we have Ashley Grimm, who is the Transportation Business Liaison at Kirkwood Community College. Good morning.
Good morning.
And seated on the end, we have Dan McGehee, who is Director of the National Advanced Driving Simulator at University of Iowa. Good morning.
Thanks, Karl. Glad to be here.
So glad to have you guys, and we're just going to spend a little time talking about the transportation industry. But before we get into really any questions, kind of discuss what you guys do in your background, if you would, please, Ashley.
So I have a little bit of background prior to working at Kirkwood. I come from Nordstrom. I was there for 12 years, and my last position at Nordstrom was the Transportation Assistant Manager, and I got to oversee the transportation department and some of the logistics of inbound and outbound operations of packages. And then I started recently at Kirkwood as the Transportation Business Liaison, and I oversee the CDL trucking program as well as the Creative Corridor Transportation Sector Board.
Very good. Dan, please.
I've been at the University of Iowa for 25 years now. I'm on the faculty in engineering and direct the National Advanced Driving Simulator. Had the great opportunity to work with some great students, scientists and engineers and faculty over the years to help develop the technologies that are making our cars safer and eliminating car crashes. And that's really our mantra. Is our job is to eliminate crashes, because it's a major public health issue, not only in the US, North America, but worldwide. We kill over 1 million people a year on our roadways, and over 40,000 in the US.
Wow. So let's start there with the eliminating car crashes. What are some of the things that you guys are doing? Is it the research? Is it the engineering aspect? What are you guys doing to eliminate some of those crashes nationally as well as globally?
Well, we study why people crash first, and then develop the technologies, study the technologies that help prevent those crashes altogether, or make them less severe. So 25 years ago, we were doing some of the very first forward collision warning system research. Now today, in a $20,000 Toyota Corolla, you can buy a forward collision warning system. It's a standard technology. We work about 20 years ahead of where we are in production today. And so we concentrate on looking at why people crash, whether it's distraction, speeding, alcohol, drugs. We have specialists from just about every single college at the University of Iowa, whether it's medicine, pharmacy, engineering, computer science. That's what we do every day, is we bring together those kinds of specialists so that we can figure out how to prevent those crashes in the future.
Very good. So Ashley, talk a little bit about what are some of the things you guys are doing at Kirkwood, whether it be to prevent crashes or to make transportation easier for people?
So a couple things that I'll highlight. In our class, we educate on health, and we do bring in a Hy-Vee dietitian to talk about proper nutrition and proper rest. And one thing that I think is helping right now is the electronic logging devices that are out there and holding drivers accountable for their hours and making sure that they're not going over that maximum hours that they can drive per day, and that they're sticking to that. And ultimately that's going to keep the roads safe so you don't have them drifting in other lanes and protecting the other drivers.
And so it's mainly folks that drive semis is who you're dealing with?
Yes, mainly it's your Class A is a semi truck driver. We also do Class B, which has the dump trucks, the buses, like a tour bus, things like that.
Okay. And what's the average amount of hours someone should drive before they have to take a little bit of a rest?
So it's 10 hours in a day. And some of that time is including the loading and offloading of product. And they can't go more than 80 hours consecutive in a week. So,
Well, very good. So as we look at some of the technology that's going into cars, I think the question on everybody's mind is how soon will we see driverless vehicles become more of the norm in society, cars and or trucks?
So I think it's really more of a progression than sort of a bright line. So if you take a look at what's called advanced driver assistance systems, especially in this model year, the 2018 model year, many manufacturers are making automatic emergency braking, lane keeping systems, adaptive cruise control standard as part of their packages, even in the most least expensive vehicles out there. And that includes heavy trucks as well. We have partnerships with Volvo Truck in Sweden, Volvo Car, and other heavy truck manufacturers. All of them are working on these technologies and releasing them today, including second-party manufacturers that are developing lane-keeping systems to add on to heavy trucks. So if you take a look at even my drive up here from Iowa City today, I have a system that if I drift in my lane, it just gently nudges me back in. And think for heavy truck operations where you say, you know, even though 10 hours doesn't seem like a long time, there's a lot of things that can go wrong while you're driving and you drift in and out of your lane, whether you're driving a passenger vehicle or a heavy truck. So as we connect the dots between those technologies, we allow them to drive a little longer on their own. But today we still need a driver behind the wheel, and these systems are monitoring the driver versus the driver monitoring the systems.
Right. So are you guys doing or using any of that at Kirkwood? Are they being instituted into any of the trucks that you guys as drivers are using, or is it not so much happening at this point in the vehicles that you guys use?
we don't have it happening at this time with our current program, but it's definitely something that I would love to see in the future that we implement, especially to prepare our drivers for the real world.
Yeah. So if we think about you mentioned, Dan, basically having, always needing someone driving the vehicle. Will you not need as many? Will it cause there to be a reduction in the market, or, you know, the job market for individuals who have built their lives and careers on driving either trucks and or vehicles across country or, you know, interstate?
So we're still decades away from a true driverless vehicle. I think that's really important. There's a lot of hype around automated driving. Certainly we can demonstrate driverless cars very well. There's been some very well-known driverless truck demonstrations even in Colorado, for instance. But there's a big difference between what you can demonstrate and what you implement for everyday driving. So highway driving will be one of the first areas that we see higher levels of automation, but not driverless automation. In terms of the job issues, Ashley can talk much better than me about the lack of drivers and the big driver shortage there is in the US. This is a huge problem. I mean, companies like CRST, Heartland, can't grow their business because they can't find enough drivers. So I think there are two different issues there. We're still very far away, decades from getting a true robot truck on the highway, but we do have a huge shortage of drivers today.
And so I'll ask that question to you, Ashley, a slightly different way. If you guys are struggling, or you guys are basically teaching or implementing drivers to come on, are you seeing a reduction in the number of folks that are actually coming into the field? And if so, how are you reaching out to them? And are you looking at the technology as a way to maybe make it more appealing to folks that might not be thinking about driving?
I think we're actually, right now in our program, maxed, and we're seeing an increase in people coming through the program that are wanting to be drivers, but I feel as though, you know, there's such a demand that right now the technology is not going to push them away. It's only going to grow, and, you know, like he said, Heartland Express, CRST, Westside, all of these, you know, people are in such dire need for the extreme shortage that we have that I don't see it really taking a toll on the drivers.
Okay. So one question that I have will kind of shift gears because I brought up policymakers in my intro. Are we seeing our local, county, state, and even some of our national representative policymakers adjusting some of the changes that are happening with transportation? Are they implementing that locally, at a local level and statewide? And if not, what needs to happen? Or if so, what is happening?
So safety of vehicles are regulated by the federal government. So the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, which is part of the US DOT, regulates safety among vehicles. So the car that you drove in here today, its headlighting systems, its seat belts, airbags, all of those safety technologies are regulated by the government. So there are important safety standards that everybody abides to. Things are fast moving in the automated driving system domain. The government does pretty well at keeping up, but this is a faster generation that we've ever seen before in terms of how quickly technology is moving. So there's a bit of lag and a catch up for the government to do right now. And policy historically has always lagged behind technology, whether you're the computer industry, internet, the government is always sort of playing catch up. So it's not an unusual position to be in.
Okay. And how does what is happening at a policy level affect your drivers, good, bad, or indifferent?
Well, in a lot of ways, you know, for example, like I said, the electronic logging devices, I mean, that's controlling the hours that they're on the road. They're doing some new things with requiring some actual training for applicants who are wanting to get their licensing. It's no longer you can go take your permit at the DOT and then come back and test. You actually have to have some training in a vehicle. So those are some initiatives that are changing with the policies as well.
Okay. And so let's talk about ride sharing, the Ubers, the Lyfts, the different methods of people commuting in cities and just even around our state now. What do you see in terms of that field affecting, again, transportation just in general? And will technology become more used in some of that, or will we push out some of our local government-run transportation entities because of different ride-sharing programs, or will they enhance our transportation?
Well, I see ride-hailing and ride-sharing as something that enhances our daily lives. So for instance, in the transit side of things, many cities and municipalities don't have bus service on Sundays or late night. And so this is a really inexpensive way for a city or a county to provide vouchers for point-to-point transportation. So let's just say that you work the night shift at a factory on a Sunday. A city can give you an Uber or a Lyft code or a ride-sharing code that's only good between your place of business to your home, versus giving out a cash voucher for a taxi. Could be economical, but it's hard to sort of check that. This would only be good from one point to another. So that would actually expand services for people that don't have the resources, that have difficulties in transportation during off hours.
That's brilliant. So people that are maybe low income are having to work third shifts or work offset jobs, or even folks with disabilities would have the opportunity to take use of that. Is that rampant here in eastern Iowa? Do you know for sure, or is that just something that's being proposed?
Yeah, it's something that we're in ongoing discussions on right now. Because if you take a look at the cost of one bus and one driver,
Certainly.
the cost of fuel, the actual bus itself, and the driver plus their benefits, it's very expensive to continue service for late night, overnight, and on weekends. Whereas if you have only a few hundred people that might need that service, it can be pretty inexpensive for a city to provide that kind of a subsidy to help people get to work.
Okay. So electric vehicles, I know we talked about driverless. Will we see electric vehicles, and will that transfer to semis and ride-sharing vehicles and city municipalities having buses and vans on the road? Any thoughts?
From an electrical perspective, I mean, we already have those vehicles. It's just a matter of expounding on them and, you know, how many ports do we have to charge these vehicles,
Certainly.
and how convenient is it? It's all about convenience for the consumer and efficiencies. And I still think there's going to be the need for fuel and for regular vehicles. And until we totally move that way, I don't see it growing too much. But it is up and coming, so only time will tell.
Certainly. Any thoughts?
Yeah, we're certainly seeing, you know, companies like Volvo have already said that, you know, in the next 5 years, they're no longer going to make a gas-only vehicle. They're only going to make hybrids and electrics. And I think that's really the first stake, you know, planted in the ground, and other car companies will sort of take that and begin to follow those things. But purely electric there's more challenges, but the range is expanding very quickly every year. It's going, you know, from first, you know, 30 miles to 60 miles to 120 miles to 240, over 300 now for Tesla. So that's something that technology is going to slowly be able to push that to a full tank of gas, you know, 300 miles on a charge.
So do electric vehicles still take gas, or are they just all electric? I have no...
Yeah, so there's several different kinds of electric vehicles. There's the hybrid electric vehicles that's mostly known as sort of like a Prius, which is one of the most common. And that has a regular gas engine plus an electric motor. And so it will switch off back and forth. When it needs power, it starts the regular engine. Gotcha. You have other kinds of electric vehicles that have a really small engine, but it's only to charge the battery. So it's actually not powering the vehicle. Gotcha. That's getting to be more common in Europe, that style. And the pure electric, just the plug-in electric, which you plug into your garage or at the grocery store around.
So what would that do in a state like Iowa, where we're using ethanol, we're using corn to turn into ethanol to be used as fuel? Would our state policymakers push back against something like that, or would they open us up for business per se to electric vehicles because it's technology, it's a way to bring in business? What do you think? Is this a good thing or not?
You take that one.
You know, I think our energy needs are constantly evolving, and I think policymakers and others are looking at alternative energy sources. And I think all of those things change. You can also argue that, you know, wind power in Iowa is one of the biggest energy areas that we have to offer. That our cars of the future will be powered by wind as well. So I think, as in any area, we have to constantly understand how our needs are changing, and so that's really what people are doing right now.
So you brought up Volvo a little bit and some of the technological advances they're making. We're seeing apps in cars, so we're seeing the digitizing of our vehicles. Will vehicles, whether they're smart cars or not, will they be online? Will all of our vehicles at some point in the near future be connected? Will we be able to talk to our vehicles? As I think of the old movie, David Hasselhoff and Kit and talking to cars. Will that become our norm at some point as cars now are connected to the internet? And is that a good thing as we think about distractions, as you talk about limiting the distractions in vehicles? Will that cause more distraction?
Yeah, so our cars are we're already connected. Our cars are connected to the internet now. I think what you're talking about is vehicle-to-vehicle communication, which is something that certainly is also coming. So the next generation of those automated vehicles will be talking to one another. So when a car brakes down the road, your car will know that the lead vehicle is braking 10 cars down. And so that kind of thing will be able to occur. I think the distraction side is a different issue. I think one of the challenges that we have, because we are so addicted to our smartphones, is that car makers are really trying to make what you see on your phone bigger and easier and less distracting than pulling out a little tiny screen and trying to read that while you drive. Certainly you can argue that those big screens are distracting, but I would argue that your phone is way more distracting than that. So it's really trying to be able to modulate what you show a driver while you're in motion versus completely unregulated, just having your hand out in front of you while you drive.
Certainly. And how about in the trucking industry? Is that something, are trucks becoming a little more digitized? Are they connected to the internet, and will that increase?
Sure, yes, they are. I mean, you know, we're already connected in today's vehicle and in trucking with the OnStar and the Bluetooth, and I just see it growing, and you know, the navigation as well. So I see it growing, and hopefully it's not distracting to our drivers.
Certainly, safety is key. Couple more questions. We're almost out of time. Let me maybe push the envelope a little bit, because if we eventually will have driverless cars, will we have cars that eventually end up off the ground? Will they fly too? Because as I consider cars that just drive, why? If we already have airplanes that have wheels, at some point would they push and now have, which would cut the drive or the transport time for trucks? Will we see cars that eventually end up off the ground?
Well, again, only time will tell.
Yeah.
It'll get things there quicker, but I guess we better start planning for some landing zones and bigger garages and space for those type of vehicles. But I definitely think it's years and years down the road.
Okay.
Yeah, I think what people don't really realize is how much energy it takes to lift us humans off the ground. If you think about a little drone that just carries a little camera and stuff, and how big some of those are, and you have to now increase the payload 100 times. It's not a small footprint to be able to just drop into a parallel parking spot. The amount of energy it takes to do that is enormous. So I think this is still kind of a fantasy world to be able to do that. Certainly, again, there are a lot of people that can demonstrate these kinds of vehicles, but implementation is a very different story.
More difficult. So let's come back a little more to reality then. I won't go too far into sci-fi. But as we talk about plug-ins and things for electric cars, will that change parking spaces and parking garages? I know space becomes a premium, whether you're looking to park downtown or you're even just running into a grocery store. If we see more of these vehicles enter our space, what will that do for, as cities have already planned 5 and 10 years out, we're going to build this big parking ramp. Do they have to put more plug-in spaces? I mean, how will that change parking even?
I definitely think you would have to have more ports that are work with the vehicles that we are producing. As far as parking and space, I mean, all of these vehicles, no matter whether they're fuel or electric, they need to be housed in some sort of parking space or garage or something. So I don't see that going away by any means.
Yeah, so really they just need to charge at some point, and so they don't have to charge everywhere they go, because they can go a week or more, depending on how much they drive without getting charged. I think what we will see in terms of automation is automated parking garages. And what that does is it decreases the amount of space and therefore increases the number of vehicles that you can park because you don't have to open the doors. So we can demonstrate a car that will go park itself. That's pretty safe because they only go about 2 or 3 miles an hour. And then it backs into the parking spot and it only needs a few inches on each side. So you don't have to open the door. So you can increase the volume of a parking garage by 1/3 just because you don't have to open the doors.
Oh, that's neat. So not only would we have more space, but now our cars aren't like our cell phones and they're losing juice.
That's right.
As quickly. So I guess I didn't consider that. That's why I asked about the charging stations, thinking that, from point A to point B, would you have to charge?
Yeah, certainly
them?
will need to be charged, but, and once they're built into the infrastructure, essentially putting an outlet, behind every vehicle, so.
Okay. One last question. As cities move forward, officials must consider what to do with land, roadways, as people move in different patterns. If more and more people are climbing in and out of shared vehicles, curbside, traffic could stall. Will we see an increase in designating drop-off and pick-up spaces at large venues like our U.S. Cellular Center downtown, big civic mall or malls and different civic events? Will we have to see a change in patterns in how people get in and out of vehicles if ride sharing and some of those things become a little more rampant?
Absolutely. If that, as that grows, we have to adapt to it. And so to ensure efficiency and keep the traffic flowing and to make our roads safe, I think that they would adapt as well.
And in education and academia, are those things being talked about and pushing those things to policymakers and people who design cities?
Not from our perspective right now, at least in the trucking industry,
Certainly.
but
Yeah, certainly,
Yeah.
I mean, in the field of urban and regional planning, that's a key area in terms of how you design that mall of the future if there is no parking lot.
Right.
But that, again, is pretty far away. We're pretty creative when it comes to getting dropped off a block away, 2 blocks away. Just like we have to park. If you go to a mall, you got to walk 5 or 10 minutes to get to the mall.
Right.
It's going to be very similar.
Okay. Wow, we've appreciated both you guys' perspective. Thank you for just the perspective, and hopefully people will consider the changes in the industry, and hopefully our policymakers are paying attention because things will have to change. I think of children right now and what they have to deal with when we look at driving in the future, and curbs, drop-offs, and electric cars, all the things that are going to change, as well as an employment perspective. So a lot to think about. I'm hoping that if this topic is brought up again, we can have you guys back and talk about some of the changes that are made. Our world, state, and local municipalities will be better served providing low-cost and on-demand access to a variety of vehicles that could improve access for all groups, while also allowing cities to retire low-usage public transit routes. Advances in technology will have major implications for cities around the world. Those that get a head start on developing integrated mobility plans will be better positioned to reap the benefits that new technologies will bring to their residents. We thank you for taking the time this morning to join us and discuss this important topic. Thank you, the viewer, for watching, and we hope it makes transportation easier for us all. Good morning.
thank you.
Thank you.